Host Gary Anderson.
We are back. We had a tech, I don't know what was going on, but it's strange. Skype wouldn't take any phone calls. James, I don't know how many times you tried. You finally went through. I checked it when everything crashed, which I found really crazy. But you managed to get through this last time. I mean, how many times did it take before it rang?
Well, Jeff couldn't get through on the main number. I tried. I couldn't get through, so I had him calling on my number. Now, I heard he was on there, but then I was listening on that one app, and I kept getting kicked off.
Well, yeah, because we weren't broadcasting, and we went off the air. Now, how did you get through this time?
I just dialed, and I guess it went through. You answered it on the 6695 number.
Yeah, how many times did you have to call it? Just once, and it went through?
Yeah, this time just once.
Yeah, I don't know. He's going to be calling back in a minute or two on your line. So I don't know what was going on, but everything seems to be working now. I don't know if I said something I shouldn't have said and we got shut down. I don't know. It's weird. But I run all these different computers, right? And I run on these servers, and everything started. First, the Skype wouldn't work on the line. And then the next thing I know, my broadcast that feeds out to the radio stations, that one, the server totally went out and it stopped, working. And I was doing dead air. And then next thing, my secondary through speaker radio, it goes out through all the apps. That one went down. So I had the one going out to the radio stations, went out. Then the secondary one went out. Skype went out. And then the other Skype started going out.
There was a lot going out because I was getting bounced around and booted off and couldn't get through. You want me to have him call in on...
No, I told him 10 minutes, so he should be calling back in a minute or two. This is a weird night. I'll tell you that. It's Friday. But I mean, we've had glitches happen before, but, this is real weird.
It is because he was trying to call through and he couldn't get through. So I tried. I couldn't get through. It was ringing. So that's why I had him call my number. And then, you got to listen to some curses before you get on. So I didn't even know he was on or not, so I was listening through that one app and then I kept getting kicked off of that app.
Yeah. Well, I certainly don't know what was going on, but this is weird. Even my Skype page right now is doing something weird here too. So I don't know.
Yeah, my Skype was acting. I told you earlier before the show, it was acting kind of weird and slow or something. I don't know, like it fell down and hit its head or something.
Yeah, I mean, unless Skype did something to update.
Oh Lord!
While we were on the air, because now my Skype screen is different than it was before. So that is real weird too.
Yeah, mine's still the same. If it was different, I'd have an anxiety attack on the spot.
Well, I'm having one right now.
I bet.
Okay, now. Hey, hi, Jeff. I don't know what I said tonight, but whatever I said, it is weird. My Skypes all started messing up. I use two pieces of software. I use one that feeds out strictly to the radio stations, which is on its own servers. Then I use another app that feeds out, to the internet. And both of those things went. The only thing that was working was one Skype out of everything. And that one was when I was talking to you last. So I don't know. Well, it's a weird night tonight. I tell you that.
Yeah.
Well, there's storms going on both on your side of the country and mine. So maybe it's the weather.
Yeah, well, I'm up here in Gig Harbor, Washington. So, and I know you're in California. You've been getting a lot. Oh,
yeah, okay.
You've been getting a lot of weird weather, though. My daughter, how far away are you from San Diego?
Very far. I'm in San Luis Obispo, which is in between L.A. and San Francisco.
Okay. Well, that's not that far. I mean, you're right in about, the middle of the state?
Well, we're called the Central Coast, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, getting back, so, we're back. The listeners can actually hear us now, which just really makes me feel good. So I know that you're really into music. And, again, really, here you are, into music, making music. How old were you when you started getting interested in UFOs?
I was a child. Interesting thing happened on the way to the New York World's Fair in 1964. Our family was traveling. We drove. It was a family trip in Pontiac Bonneville, pulling a trailer, and made a few stops along the way. But it was when we were going through the Monument Valley area that something really strange happened. This strange little rain cloud seemed to come out of nowhere and come straight to our car and just rain on our car only. And as it's moving along, I vaguely remember, I was like 3-4 years old at the time. I vaguely remember that I was having a conversation with a couple of my favorite cartoon characters, like Roadrunner and the Coyote. And my next memory, I came to screaming under the bar stools at my aunt and uncle's house in Artesia, New Mexico, which is just south of Roswell. And it was lightning flashing outside, and I was, of course, terrified. And never really thought about that much over the years until I was older and realized that, that most likely probably was not a rain cloud that came. And I definitely wasn't having a conversation with cartoon characters. So that was an interesting event, but it wasn't until I actually had a couple sightings. Of course, I knew growing up, my aunt and uncle lived in Artesia, New Mexico, which is just south of Roswell. And, so I heard rumors all through the 60s and 70s of the crash that happened there and the fact that it was real but covered up, and, nobody liked to talk about it because they were threatened. And then when, the story of Roswell finally did come out, it wasn't all that big a shock to me because I'd heard it from them years before. But I had a really awesome sighting probably in 1979. I was living in a recording studio in Azusa, California at the time. And I'd gone across the street to the market there to get dinner. It was probably 8:30, 8:40 in the evening, nice warm summer night, just starting to get dark. But there was still enough ambient lighting there in the San Gabriel Valley where I remember I could see the San Gabriel Mountains still and kind of like a reddish glow to the night sky still. And as I and my girlfriend at the time were coming out of the market, I noticed there's something in my peripheral vision kind of up in the upper left side. And I looked up, not really expecting to see anything, but, to my shock, here was this giant ship just kind of floating overhead. And when I say giant, one end of it I could see was down. I knew the street signals about how far they were. And one end that I could see was down about 2 to 3 signals, which I knew was probably about 3/4 of a mile or so. And I couldn't see the back end of it. It was still way far away. I could see the San Gabriel Mountains to the left side, still above the top of this thing, but I couldn't tell the width of it because it was so massive that I never got to see the sides actually of it. So it was pretty low, and it was moving very, very slow. I'd say 25 to 30 miles an hour, until all of a sudden it just zipped into this long, straight line of light, kind of like, you remember cathode ray TVs when you'd shut them off, they'd shrink down to that line across the screen?
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty much what it looked like. And then all of a sudden that line, the end of it closest to the people in the parking lot, there was other people that saw this, like maybe 100 people. All of a sudden the other end of the line just zipped into a point, and then that point of light just shot up into the sky and was gone that fast. But the whole time while that was over our heads, it was like a rock concert atmosphere. Everyone in the parking lot was whooping and hollering and whistling and pointing at it. And I said to my girlfriend at the time, this is it. It's going to be all over the news in the morning. How can, this be ignored? This is huge. And, of course, the next morning, there wasn't a word mentioned anywhere in the news, TV, radio, newspapers, nothing. And I've never heard mention of that particular event anywhere since then. But that was the 70s, and, you didn't talk about that kind of thing then, or else you were, highly suspect. But now in the environment and the atmosphere of the day, a sighting like that, people talk about it, and it's not really frowned upon as much as it was back then.
Oh, yeah. I because I've been doing radio since 76. And, when I had people in the early 80s start talking about UFOs or being abducted, I kind of, at that point in my life, I look, say to myself, that guy has a problem. But then, but I had an experience in the mid 70s in New Mexico. Me and my wife at that time, we were coming back from a job I didn't like in North Carolina, and we were in the desert in New Mexico, and I saw a bright light. This is the middle at night in the desert, in the middle of nowhere, and it lit up around the car and inside the car where it was so bright my eyes were hurting, and my wife was freaking out. So I figured it was, I was in the military. I figured, okay, it has to be a police helicopter because I was going fast. I pull off the side of the road. I get out, and the first thing I notice, I don't hear a sound. Nothing. Void of any type of sound. And the light was so intense, and then all of a sudden, poof, it was gone. And that's when I started realizing, there's things out there that, that make you wonder what is going on.
Absolutely. And, it seems like when you're traveling through the desert at night, you kind of stand out to them as much as they stand out to you. So, that's pretty interesting. And I've heard of many similar sightings just like that, where the people were checked out and then something gone. Except sometimes with sightings like that, you are probably fortunate. It sounds like they just looked and left. But in many instances, people thought it was quick like that, and come to find out it was a matter of hours instead of minutes. So yeah.
Well, that's
you
what
got off easy.
No, I don't think so. Here's why I'm saying this. I didn't think anything of it. My wife at the time was shook up. I was shook up because I didn't know what it was. But, I kind of brushed it off, didn't think anything about it. And then, I get married again. We have kids, right? And one of my kids, now he's a young adult, he gets in trouble where I have to go to court once a month with him for a year. Now, the funny thing is, I go through the court, Pierce County Courthouse in Washington. I set the alarms off. Didn't think anything of it till it happened the second, third time. Every time I go in there, it didn't make any difference how much clothes I took off. The alarm would go off. Meanwhile, I had to go to the doctor, and they, were checking out I was having health issues, and I had an MRI or whatever that is, where they put you in a machine and it sounds like a jackhammer.
Right, yeah, that's an MRI.
Yeah, and
magnetic resonance imaging.
Yeah, and then I didn't think anything of it, but I go back to the doctor 2 weeks later. I'm sitting in the waiting room. The head nurse comes out, and she goes, "Where did you get that piece of metal in your back, towards your upper part of your back, next to your spine?" And I go, "I don't have any," she goes, "Did you have an operation or something?" I go, "No." And she goes, "Well, how about military?" I said, "Yeah, I shattered my tailbone and they had to put it together." I go see the doctor, and the doctor says to me, he goes, "Well, you got something in your, next to your spine, just, about 6 inches below your shoulders." And I go, "Not that I'm aware of." No, he goes, it shows up. And I go, "I don't know where I got it." And he's looking, he goes, "I don't see any scars." Now I'm freaking out. I go to him, I said, "Well, how big is it?" And I don't remember anymore. But I said, "Can we get it, can you remove it?" And he goes, "No, because there's scar tissue that's formed around it. So if I go to remove it, you'll be in a wheelchair." Again, I didn't really think anything of that. But again, the following month, I have to go to drug court with my son because he got in trouble. I set the alarm off. They take me in the special room where they, have you undressed, and they put that little glove on it, and they go, snap. You know what I'm talking about.
No, fortunately.
Yeah, you're lucky. I tell you, the embarrassment of that. You know, I remember one time, because I'm a bigger guy. I remember one time going through